Okay. Seems like you guys are kind of haven't yet started that, which is fine. Um, who knows when the application deadline is importantly?
The 11th of February?
Yes. So it is 11:59 on the 11th of Feb. So you're into the last kind of 10 or 11 days. So still plenty of time. And hopefully today will kind of kickstart that. So I can see someone in the chat has said started drafting. My first piece of advice is to get onto the website. I'll put the application form in the chat and just copy paste all of the questions onto a Word doc or Google Doc and start drafting there. It's just much easier to kind of draft as you go along so you can update and evolve your answers without the pressure of kind of being live online. But yeah, okay, I'm gonna jump in and share my slides. Anyone not see my slides? No. Okay, cool. So today is all about nailing your application by deadline on the 11th of Feb. And question to all of you, what would you like to get out of today? Are there particular areas that you'd like feedback on? Are there particular questions that might be kind of more challenging than the others? Let me know your thoughts.
I guess it's my question, Robler here, would be how much of the focus of the answers is London centric? I mean, can we allude to the larger scale vision, or
Yeah.
should we actually just completely tailor it just to London?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I'm glad we've started with that one. So, you know, the mayor's jurisdiction is, of course, London. And this whole program is centered on making London a healthier, happier, better place to live, cleaner place to live. So it's really important that you frame everything you do on the application within London. So, for example, you could say across the UK, 800,000 people are affected by dementia each year. Much better is to say in London, 270,000 people are affected by dementia each year, and that problem is as large as 800,000 people across the UK. So everything you begin with is London focused, but you can also acknowledge that the scope or reach of the problem you're solving could be broader than that, UK wide or even international. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we are going to look through the application, some top tips, some case studies, and at the end of the session, we're going to hear from Will, who is a previous winner of the application. So from the horse's mouth, how to be successful at this stage. And so just to touch back on what I just commented on, it's really important to think about the aims of the award. So as I mentioned, this is about making London cleaner, greener, and those in it ready for the future. So think about that in all that you do. And in particular, how you shape your answer around the award categories. So I expect many of you will know these categories already, but those are environment, tech, creative industries, and health. Some of you, for instance, might be developing a new kind of chemical-free approach to dyeing fabrics, which could be used in the fashion industry, but reduce pollution in the waterways. That's kind of both environment and creative industries. So my advice and my advice from the team at City Hall is they will actually put you in the category they think you're best suited for. So it doesn't matter too much when you apply which category you go for, but often there's kind of more of a leaning to one category or another. So hopefully that clarifies that. But really, when thinking about your idea, think about how you can frame it within one of these four categories, one or more of these four categories. The application deadline, as we've already noted, 11th of February. Okay, so how to actually write an effective application. So I kind of often, I've spent the last 10 years in startups, building startups, running accelerator programs, helping other people scale existing startups. And I currently work for an impact VC called Zinc VC. So I've spent quite a lot of that time kind of sitting on the other side of the table when founders and entrepreneurs and have been, sharing their ideas. And I use the analogy of like let's say a glass of water, which is like when you first start presenting your idea or on your application form, actually your audience don't know anything about you. So that glass is like empty of confidence in your audience. But every stage you want to be endorsing yourself and backing that up with evidence, so that judging panel have every reason to believe in what you're doing. So what does that look like in practice? So first of all, is your idea original? Do you have a novel idea? We'll talk a little bit later this afternoon about what that might look like. Can you evidence societal and or environmental impact? So whether that's something that is already backed by science, that you've, proven something, maybe you have some proof points on that, or at this early stage, it could just be hypothetical. We believe when successful, we can reduce readmissions to hospital by 12%. We can reduce exposure to pollution for commuters by 18%. We can increase people's lifetime career earnings by an average of £3,000 per year. We can increase the happiness levels in care homes, those kind of measures. Another is about commercialization. So in this space, which is about impact, it sometimes can be tricky to think about how to make money. But impact and money are intrinsically linked. You can't really have impact if you don't have financial sustainability. And a little bit later, we're going to dig into different ways you can present your answer to how do you make money. So different revenue models and different kind of routes to reaching your target customers. Another thing that is super important is actually the language that you use. So I'll share some case studies too, but often the approach that is most off-putting for audiences is when there's loads and loads of technical language that the audience actually might not be experts on. And the last thing you want to do is actually disengage them by using tons of complex language, which might reduce the clarity of what you're trying to express. And then the last thing on this slide is you. Who are you? Why do you have the authority, the lived experience, the background, the academic research, the work experience that gives you the credibility to make this happen? And I think a really big part of that is kind of evidencing one of the most entrepreneurial things to have done at this earlier stage, which is, have you gone out, stepped outside the comfort of your home, out onto the proverbial pavement and spoken to your end users, beneficiaries, customers to understand their pain points? Have you, if you're working in elderly care, have you spoken to people who are in care homes or work in care homes? If you're working in A&E, have you gone out to speak to junior doctors about their experience in A&E and some of the challenges they face, etc.? So here are some kind of larger points to frame what makes a good application. And along with that, there's something about how you write things in a way that make people think, tell me more. Oh, that's something really interesting. You've got my attention. So in the chat or unmute, what might be some of the ways that you can get your audience really hooked in from the start? Any thoughts?
I guess maybe perhaps putting in something that's relatable, maybe an experience that they might have had, or something they might have seen in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example?
So I guess for me, that would possibly be something, because I'm working on a sort of property and real estate solution. So perhaps it's you had an issue with conveyancing, or you had an issue with finding an engineer, and then sort of how what we're proposing solve that. So I guess that people are saying storytelling. So I guess we're all of the same mindset there.
Yeah, totally. I think stories can be really, really compelling way to start. And so here are some things to think about. So first of all, surprise. So statistics, statements, stories that tell me something I didn't know or made me think differently. Did you know that this X problem is, a hidden challenge for those who face homelessness in the streets of London every year? Let me tell you about my experience working as a medical student over the last 3 years and what I have discovered from that experience. Did you know that this new technology using carbon nanotubes can increase the tensile strength and reduce the carbon emissions of manufacturing by X%? Using that first hook can be a really great way to make a first impression. Natalie added to that by saying, giving them the problem that needs to be solved. So for sure, starting with the problem that you're solving is everything in startups. So my second point is start with why. And on the next slide, I'll go into that in a bit more detail. The third point I've already talked about, which is clarity. Do not disengage the audience by using lots of grand words to, potentially sound impressive in a way that, might make them feel cut out from your application. The next is evidence. What research reports, what lived experience, what user conversations have you conducted that can prove some sense that your hypothesis that you're working on is true. And then the last one, excitement. Inspire me that what you're doing is novel, indispensable, and achievable. So novel, is it something that is a new type of technology or science or research? Has this come out of a research lab? Has it got intellectual property around it? Is it a new type of AI or clothing material? Or even, is it just a novel way of designing services to bring communities together? What makes it exciting? Indispensable is also important. If I sometimes think if I speak to 100 customers and say, how indispensable is this idea? And, you know, how disappointed would you be if it didn't exist? If people say 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, you're like, okay, I'm onto something. If people say 6 or 7 out of 10, it's like a nice to have, but actually that doesn't necessarily prove they're going to part with their hard-earned money to pay for this. So has anyone come across an amazing thinker around all things startup called Simon Sinek, or seen his very popular talk called Start With Why? The sense of this is that he notices that when people talk about something that they're building, a new idea, a product, a startup, people start with what I'm building an app that does, etc. And then they say how they do it. Well, we're creating, you know, certain designs and features and user experience into this app to make it easy to use. Why? Because we know that elderly populations in London face loneliness. Simon Sinek says start with why, because that last point is the one that is most engaging to your audience. So to give an example, he talks about how Apple might describe themselves versus like Toshiba or, you know, a kind of home computing brand. And rather than saying, we make computers, so the what and how through beautiful design and ease of use, and then why we believe in challenging the status quo and doing this differently. It's that last statement, which is, you know, the big inspiring hook that brings people in. It's almost like, at what level are you flying the plane? And the why is like at 20,000 feet of altitude, the bigger picture, the inspiring vision of why you exist. And what you're building. So an example here, so this is a cancer diagnostic tool. The why, 67% of cancers are diagnosed too late, costing the NHS almost £1 billion per year and over 100,000 deaths. Imagine if we could transform diagnosis by empowering GPs to detect cancer at the earliest stage. Then how GPs use our app to capture signs of cancer, what our app uses the latest advancements in machine learning, computer vision, predictive analytics, etc. Why is this order so compelling? And how might you use this kind of structure to make your application stronger? Over to you guys.
I'm sorry, Edward, did you ask a question?
Yes. What makes this structure more compelling to begin with that first statement rather than beginning with, this is what our app is and what it does?
Because it already just speaks to the problem, and not only speaking to the problem, is sort of showing the sort of, you know, how huge the problem is, because it's contextualizing how huge the problem is and what's, you know, what needs to happen immediately or what may happen if it doesn't happen, if you get my...
Exactly. And to my earlier point, it is also evidence-backed. It's got statistics, it's got impact measurement that is both health related and economic. And it includes this really nice imagine if statement. What could be different? What is a foreseeable vision for the future that could be achieved with this product? So you guys will all get these slides after the session, but feel free to screenshot and begin thinking about how you might frame your own application in these terms. And I'd love to maybe in like 5 or 10 minutes to jump back and see if any of you would like to share your own ideas using this framework. Emma, I can see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just have a quick question regarding this. What if I don't have the exact statistics? Like this is good, 67% of cancer, but what if I don't have the exact statistics? How do I still frame my why?
Do you have a sense of where you might find some useful statistics?
Yes, possibly, yeah.
What problem are you solving out of interest?
Commuting public transport system for people with physical disability like vision, hearing, and mobility. So yeah.
So some data points to start with, you know, the number of people who have auditory or visual disabilities in London. That's a really important first stat. And in the background, I'm trying to remember the name of an app. Oh, Perplexity. I love generative AI. And
Yeah, I know Perplexity.
This app that I just put in the chat is an incredible place. It's like a research search engine. So you can basically type in the problem area that you're looking to discover, and it will spit out latest research in that space.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And that goes for everyone, by the way. It's a very useful tool. Okay, so the next suggestion is about what statistics to use. So often when I read applications, I see super generic stat. Did you know that food waste causes 1.8 million tons of CO2 emissions globally? What do you guys think? Do you like this stat? What you change about it?
I guess to the first point, it's not London centric.
Yeah, it's not London centric for sure.
And then it's also very general food waste. Is it sort of organic food waste, perhaps? Is it, are we, is there a bit more focus on that thesis theory?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the what do people call it? Something like the law of large numbers, that basically the bigger the number, the more we disengage. You know, and this is part of the thing around climate change. It's like trillions of tons of CO2 and this and that. And everyone's like, whoa, that's so big. I can't even like conceptualize what that means. So in this case, I've kind of put forward a slight improvement. So food waste creates 9% of London's CO2 emissions. It's much more specific. And by the way, these are all made up stats, okay? So please don't quote me. But suddenly you can contextualize it. And if you cut that by 10%, that's equivalent of 100,000 fewer cars on the road. All made up stats. Please do not copy this. But suddenly it's relatable. You can kind of contextualize it, right? These stats are much more powerful. Please keep jumping in with your questions. Then the last version of this is user-centric. And this is when it gets really good. 87% of Londoners are concerned about rising food bills, yet 30% of food in the city is wasted. And then at the same time, food waste creates 9% of London's CO2 emissions. What this has done is put in an urgency around this, because let's say, not to focus too much on climate and environment, but one of the biggest challenges is that it's like everyone's problem and no one's problem. And the startups that can specifically identify like an individual who is directly impacted by this, they figure out how to make this successful. And when framed like this, you begin to think, wow, okay, Londoners care about money. Prices are going up. So can you combine saving money with cutting emissions? We are in a world that is heating up and emissions are going up. But like, how do we make that worth people's while at an individual level to create behavior change? Does that make sense? Any thoughts or comments on this one? I think this is a really important point.
Actually, I did want to ask a question, Ed. So I've done surveys. I've got sort of net promoter scores and the like, but I wasn't sure if I could sort of use that broad statement of saying Londoners, or should I say respondents to my survey, right? So you know, how do I frame it?
Yeah, survey respondents is fine.
Okay.
You know, we consulted 200 people and 43% of them X. Yeah.
Okay, so
extrapolate.
I wouldn't go as far as saying London, is it? Would just sort of be like, well, I did a survey in London. I mean, I obviously word it a bit more eloquently. 200 respondents and X percentage said this.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In fact, I mean, your comment is making me realize, you know, this stat on the screen is probably quite hard to capture, but I think you get the point. Yeah, that's a really, really good point to bring up. Any other thoughts or questions on this, thinking about how you might translate this approach into your own application? Okay, let's move on. So now we're going to look at the first 5 questions, and I'm going to share some case studies, and you guys can kind of critique those case studies. But these are the 5 real questions from the application form. So question 1, my business idea is, so be clear, what is your idea? An app, a website, a new technology, a clothing line, and what benefits does it bring to your customers? And here is an example. My business idea is a platform called Carbon Z that tracks carbon emissions across the city. What do you guys think? How strong is this answer?
Very, very broad. Yeah, I think that was the takeaway for me.
How might you improve it?
Carbon Z is a platform that tracks carbon emissions through sensors, through you know, gully traps, something that, you know, what is that actual technology behind this?
So like exactly what the technology is. A platform is super generic. Also carbon emissions, like what carbon emissions, why, for what reason. So yeah, this is very, very generic. So what is it? An app, a website? How does it even collect this data? What benefits does it bring? Next question, to solve the problem of, and my advice here, what specific problem are you solving and how can you demonstrate it's a big problem? If this affects, you know, a few thousand people each year, it's probably quite hard to build a business model in that because what's called your market size is just not big enough. Like the total money spent on solving this problem is just not large enough. So use stats, research, examples to bring the problem to life. And, you know, this is where all of the work that you have done in researching your problem can come out. So here's an example. Solving the problem of London residents who are worried by the high pollution in the city. In some areas, pollution in London is 5 times the EU limit. Just a reminder, do not quote these stats. Although I think this one is actually accurate. What are your thoughts about this response?
It's not really solving the problem. The app is not, from the way they phrase the Cloud Z, what Cloud Z is, it doesn't say here what problem, how it's solving the problem. It's just stating that, residents are worried about the high pollution, but it's not saying how it is solving the pollution problem.
Exactly. It's just capturing data about high pollution for London residents. How can I make this more specific? Another way to think about this is, I imagine most of you guys are somewhere between like 18 and 25, 18 and 30, something like that. Do you buy the same stuff as your parents or grandparents? Easy question.
Some things, not all.
Some things, yes. Like, can you give an example of something that is designed very differently for someone in your age group to someone of your parents or grandparents' generation? Oh, it says hairstyles. Yeah, for sure. And this is a good point, like fashion, styles, how we present ourselves, how, our identity, the brands we respond to, the food we eat, the technology we use, and also the challenges we face, the behaviors we have. They are so different across age groups, geographies, demographies, and the stronger answers are able to articulate something really specific. So as I put here, the problem, this is way too generic. A better response might be Carbon Z solves the problem of London residents, let's say aged 18 to 30, who lack information about the areas of the city that are most affected by pollution and want to know where to avoid while traveling. I didn't include the age group here, but I think age, demography, geography really kind of portrays that you've kind of done the hard work to think about this problem and who it affects. So main customers are, my advice, do not say anyone in London or London residents, because that's just not true. That's not how these solutions work. The best idea is solve a problem for a specific group. As I just mentioned, demographics, needs, behaviors, likes, dislikes, how many are they? Where do they shop? How do they act? And like bring your customer persona to life. So here I put as the response, London residents. I probably don't need to tell you that that is a bad answer. But instead, you could write London smartphone users aged 25 to 45 who care about the environment, are concerned about their health, and are interested in using tech to track routines. So suddenly we know where they are, roughly their age, they're active technology users, they're, environmentally conscious and health conscious. And so you have a very clear subsection of London residents. So of 8 or 9 million total residents, this might be more like 1 million people in that age group. The environmentally conscious of those might be 500,000. Those who are really techie within that might be 350,000. But you have a really specific group of people that you're optimizing for. Any questions at this point? I'm checking the chat, but just in case I've missed any. Irene.
Hi, thanks for this. I had a question about the MVP. And if you're doing like various different interviews and your MVP is iterating as a result of the interview process. At what point, like when you fill out this application, are you showing the progress and the iterations, or are you just showing the end result of the interviews?
Can you give me an example, just so I'm clear?
So if I'm doing various different personas for my customers and who my customers are, and if certain customers who are aged certain ages have one particular need, but actually then another group who are aged differently show a different need. So my MVP then needs to adjust to cater for a wider range of customers. Like, how do I provide that level of information on the application?
This is great. You're clearly doing loads of tests and experiments, which is really great to hear. I would frame this as the group that feel this problem most. So from all of these experiments, who is the group that is like most impacted by this problem? And use that. And in terms of the MVPs you developed, use the one that's kind of emerged as the strongest fit to their needs. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so the next one, unique selling point. I feel this is an area that is often misunderstood. So unique selling point is basically, how do you differentiate your idea in a way that gives you more market share? So why would customers come to you and not other people? And why would they continue using your solution rather than other people's? This USP, unique selling point, is basically something that becomes a driver of growth and kind of commercialization of your solution. I've just seen a hand go up, but your name has disappeared. Whoever just put their hand up, do you want to, is that Beard? Do you want to unmute and jump in?
Yes, it is Beard. I have a question in regards to doing like market research. Just on the previous things we've spoken about, how do you know, first of all, how do you go about gathering information about your target customer? And then how do you know you've spoken to enough of them to really understand their past behaviors and know if you have a good fit in the market?
The first part of the question, do you want to answer your own question? Like, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it depends on the idea, but perhaps maybe surveys or maybe just going out and talking to people, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm a huge believer from experience in personal one-to-one conversations, but complemented with survey. Surveys often have confirmation bias inherent within them, but gives you larger sample size. So you could get 100 respondents. That's more what's called statistically significant. You can start drawing assumptions about like a population if you have, let's say, 100 or more respondents. But you learn most when you have one-to-one conversations. And broadly, a rule of thumb of like how many of each to speak to for a survey, I always hope to kind of start with 50 or more. Scientifically, like 50 is typically seen as like the baseline for statistical significance, but really you want to go upwards of that. And then in terms of one-to-one conversations, a minimum of 10. After 10, you find that you might, a lot of the same insights keep coming up. Does that?
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. So back to the USP, you know, here, like, how is your solution cheaper, faster, more efficient, easier to use, more impactful, easier to find Does it provide something to your customers they don't currently have? Do you have any intellectual property around it? Have you spent tons of time like doing research and development, been in a lab, which is time that other competitors might have to replicate or repeat to be able to compete with you? So those are a few different types of USP. And here are some examples. So we hope to make London air cleaner and safer for everyone. What do you guys think about that answer?
Very big. How
Super.
do you propose to? That's not unique in any sense. Like,
Yeah, this.
We all hope for that.
Sorry.
We all hope for that.
Yeah, exactly. You're not really saying anything new, right? So too generic. What about our tech collects pollution data from a specific source to give Londoners a clear picture of the parts of the city most affected by pollution? We are the only product, that's good user language to use, the only product that does these benefits. For example, reduces travel time by 10% while reducing pollution exposure by up to 25%. So talking about the benefits of your product. Would anyone like to share their USP? Get feedback. Louise says the root of pollution is too high a population. That is population size definitely impacts pollution levels, but there's lots of other factors at play for sure. Someone was about to speak.
Yes, Robler here. I guess my USP, perhaps I might be wrong, but it's the output from 2 years worth of academic research.
Mm-hmm.
So we sort of built an algorithm, and we're sort of then now building that algorithm into a consumer app to then sort of be beneficial to users. Is that a strong enough, or should I add some flair to it? I don't know.
Tell me what it does and the benefits that it returns to your users.
So it's an algorithm for processing building data. So it allows it to aggregate data, but then also the outputs can be either very technical if you're sort of an engineer or whatever, but if you're just an everyday user, it can be simplified, and the terminology and everything else will be simplified. So it processes data, but so it processes data in a way that's not processed today, but the outputs we've also, because we're building a consumer app, we've built the outputs so that they can come out in 2 different ways, either for everyday use or for technical use.
Okay, so sounds cool. I get that it processes data. What do I use that data for, and how does it make my life better?
So with perhaps the building data, if you're an engineer, then obviously you need the nitty-gritty numbers. But if you're an everyday user, you really just want to know if your pipe is being changed, is it being changed? For example, if it's a plumbing issue, if it's being changed to one that is to code, to planning policy of sort of London. But with the same stroke of the brush, so it allows better communication between builders and I mean, when we were doing the code, it was for stakeholders. So it allows better communication with all the building stakeholders.
I'm going to push you on this because I think this is a really good example. There's clearly lots of potential here, but I actually don't know what it is. I still don't know what it is. You use words like stakeholders.
Okay, it's confusing.
Stakeholders means nothing to me.
Right.
It's an overused word. It's not specific. And
okay.
Communication and its data, none of those things are benefits in and of themselves. Here are some ways of describing benefits, and I'm making stuff up here, okay?
Okay.
So, for example, for users of my app who are residents in London, access to our data gives them peace of mind that their utilities will be safe, secure, and low cost, at all times,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Peace of mind, that is an emotional benefit, less stress.
Yeah.
Cost, security, efficiency, those are rational benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Communication, stakeholders, data, like those are functions, those are like inputs, but they're not outcomes.
Right.
Right. Then in terms of your USP, you want to be talking about these benefits, right? And some of them might be hypothetical. You might not know the impact of your algorithm yet, but you can posit what you can claim, what impact you think it will have. And then in terms of talking about your algorithm, you can say, you know, we have built our own proprietary algorithm and data sets that puts us at an advantage above our competitors in providing customers with benefit 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So
Okay.
really framing it in a specific way. This goes for everyone. Like, thanks so much for jumping in, by the way, because I think this is a really good case of like where the clarity of language is really important.
Okay. No, thank you so much. Yeah, no, tangible. It's basically have tangible benefits for the actual for Londoners rather than being lost in the technical winds of academia and technical language.
Yeah, totally. And equally, you know, for the construction workers and builders, like benefits for them might be like reduced risk. You know, the risk profile in property development is super high. You know, risk like insurance risk and insurance claims can be very expensive. Like, so financial, reputational, emotional benefits. Well, there's tons of them, and from your app, there's clearly loads that it creates, but you just need to specify them.
Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
Irene, I can see your hand up.
Hi, yeah. I'm just wondering how accurate some of the figures need to be. If we haven't got those figures, can we extrapolate? Can we make estimates? You know, I know you mentioned like the emotive side, the qualitative, you know, benefits. If we don't have a figure, does that change the impact of that? What do we do there?
This you don't want to make anything up, but you can say as you said, we forecast that we can achieve X percent, like quantitative outcome. For example, like we forecast, we hypothesize, we believe. So it's not something proven yet, but it is like the direction that you believe you're traveling in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, gonna move on. So to look a little bit more at this thing about the USP, I think like innovation is again often a bit misunderstood. Innovative ideas are about setting yourself apart from the competition to secure greater market share. And you can be innovative in different ways. Your product, your algorithms, like Roble mentioned, the IP, the stuff that's come out of your lab, the material science that's gone into the construction materials you're using, or the fashion brand that you're building, whatever it might be. But also you can be innovative around your business model. You know, like Tom's Shoes have an innovative business model where you buy one and they give one away for free. So it could be there's like a cross-subsidy model. So the people who have economic means can pay, you know, at a markup, and those who are from lower income households access important goods and services at a lower cost. And then also operating model innovation, like how the mechanics of your business function to achieve market share. I think a great example is Amazon, who are just like pushing people to think, why would I buy anything anywhere else if Amazon stuff arrives on my doorstep within 24 hours? You know, that is like an incredibly complex operating model of logistics and AI and robotics and whatever. But like they get market share because of that, right? So there's tons of different ways to be innovative. Would anyone like any kind of input or feedback on their ideas and ways in which you can address this question? Today's a good opportunity if you want feedback. But okay, let's see someone in the chat. Tao says, mine is a tech item, but Apple have started with the headsets. Our difference is the software used. Tao, if you're happy, do you want to unmute and share a little bit more information, or put it in the chat, just so I have a bit more?
It's a bit noisy because I'm in Saudi, so I'll mute
Oh,
myself.
wow.
Yeah, background
Okay.
getting away. So looking at my USP, this is one that I kind of struggle with. And I'm trying to set up a PT agency, a personal training agency for young people to sort of help the employability issue and get them off the streets. And the aim of
using VR headsets?
It's a part of the thing. We want to keep the traditional way of training, but VR headsets will be one of the products that we bring out once we've built that reputation.
Okay. Sorry, one sec. So I think there's lots to talk about here, right? You can say, our unique selling point is that we combine the job, the like health benefits of personal training sessions with the job opportunities that those are created for young people who might otherwise be unemployed. That's really cool. You're like, developing something that other people aren't doing. So that's
I'm trying to do it in a different way because I have personal experience as a survivor myself. And I'm a referee, so I have a sports academia. So like because of where I'm from and what I've kind of gone through, it has kind of inspired me to try and support other young people. And another thing I'm trying to do as part of our USP is to get the young people training executives, but I don't quite know how I'm going to get that integration together, like how I'm going to get young people from rough backgrounds training corporates. Do you know what I mean?
I love that. It's such a cool idea. I would check out a organization called Circle, which I just put in the chat. They do a similar thing, but for like leadership coaching, where they get young people to actually coach like execs. So it's like a two-way mentorship model to learn and develop across generations. People aren't thinking the way that you are, Toro, about this space. And so there's tons of stuff you can talk about. So like, one, like there is this model of creating economic opportunity for these young people. Second, like creating a model that's sustainable through corporate engagement. Third, incorporating the latest advancements in technology, including VR headsets. Fourth, having personal experience of this space that puts you an advantage, that you just get it, you like lived it. That's extremely powerful. And then the fifth thing is you have academic credentials in this as well, right? Like this is research backed, it's science backed. All of those are like big USPs.
Wow. You know my business. You sound like you know my business model more than I do.
No. Yeah, those are there's tons of stuff you can talk about. So I hope that helps.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, no worries at all. Enjoy Saudi. Okay, what time are we on? We're at 5 o'clock now. So before we go any further, let's just have a quick 5-minute break. You can mute, turn your videos off, and we'll kick off for part 2 at 5:05. See you in a little bit. Cheers. Okay, hi guys, welcome back. Hope you've had a quick break, ready for part 2. So one of you's asked about the slides from today. Now see in the chat. So that's for Irene. Before we go any further, Natalie, you wrote in the chat before the break, we are digitally remapping the city with past, present, and then potential childhood memories. Sounds super, super interesting. Can you go a step further and talk about the benefits of your app? So you've talked about what it does, the inputs.
I'll give it my best shot. Well, we believe that our cities are no longer designed for children.
Yeah.
And so and through that thought, we then realized how isolated people are. And if there could be one bonding quality, a glue that could bring everybody together, it was through this thought that actually, everyone's had a childhood. It was possibly one of the most democratic thoughts I'd ever had. And actually, this could be a really beautiful way that you bring communities together, irrelevant of age, irrelevant of anything, really. And also, we thought it was a rather beautiful way to reanimate cities rather than them being basically just restaurants and empty shops, getting kids out again playing and finding. And so it's an idea that is still quite big. We have tried to distill it as much as possible. I come from a brand background, so we've distilled it down to as much as we possibly can. But as soon as somebody wants me to talk about it, I can't stop, and so I talk about everything and anything. But yeah, so that's the idea. It's about reanimating our cities, making our cities children friendly or child friendly, and through that we believe our cities would be friendly to all. I think, whether that be the 16-year-old or a woman walking home at 9:30 at night. Why any woman at 9:30 at night should feel unsafe is just appalling, isn't it? So it's really kind of, as I say, it started from just a very simple observation. Actually, during COVID, I took my son out for bike rides, and I remember crossing Waterloo Bridge and telling him that that was where I had my first kiss, which obviously he was completely disgusted by. But we then went through the city because it was so empty, and he too started to reminisce, and it just felt as though it would be such a wonderful way to rebrand cities, give them a new identity. So that's where the idea came from. And
it's okay. I'm gonna jump in. I love this idea. It is as people have commented in the chat, it's really meaningful. It's memory is such a powerful thing to share, and it really unites people. As a side point, I've just shared a book that I've been reading called Together. Which is by the Surgeon General from the Obama administration, which is basically about community cohesion and the loneliness epidemic, which might be interesting. It's really good. But you've actually, through talking, named many benefits here. I think you should really bring through. So one of them was about social cohesion. Loneliness is a real problem. It's being described as more impactful on health than smoking every day.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. You've also mentioned about children's health. So creating active outdoor experiences are just good for young people's health. There's also a massive kind of health and nutrition problem in London. So that's another area. And also kind of broadly about kind of community happiness and cohesion. That's like the emotive impact here, I think, which is making, back to the aims of the awards, making London like a happier, healthier place to live. So I think you can really bring all of those out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very kind of you. And Louise, thank you.
Okay, so as ever, we're going to be up against time a little bit, but let's see how we get on. I'm going to go back to my slides. Can anyone not see my slide? No. Okay. So the next question, how would you describe your idea to your grandparents? So basically this means, how do you explain the idea in the most fundamental, jargon-free, simplest terms? So how do you describe it so anyone understands as engaged and is engaged, and avoid technical knowledge and language, make it relevant to them, bring it to life with examples, stats, compelling or attention-grabbing statements, as Natalie and others of you on this call have already done. So here is an example. My idea is an artificial intelligence tool that uses blockchain, multiple APIs, and citywide metadata to track pollution in London. What do you all think about this answer?
My grandparents wouldn't understand that at all.
Thank you. Yes. In previous sessions that I've run, people have said, yeah, cool, like this answer, because it sounds shiny and impressive. But then if you really think about it, like, what does it mean? And does anyone actually understand it? So this is my prompt to avoid using lots of buzzwords and shiny words, to be really straightforward. And going back to this point of start with why, start with the benefits. So have I got an example here? So my grandparents, if they're still around, would not understand these terms. How can you describe something so people would understand irrespective of their knowledge? So instead, you could say, my idea is a mobile app that allows any cyclist in London to navigate their commute safely, quickly, and with reduced pollution exposure, ensuring improved health and pleasurable journeys to work. There is zero reference to any complex technology. And most of all, it is just using language that is just really clear, right? This is probably not the perfect answer, but I hope, most people would kind of get a sense of what this is. And the important thing is conveying why it's important. That's the thing that people hang on to. As I often say to people, if I worked for Black & Decker or Robert Dias or whatever, I would not sell people a drill. I'm selling people the 3-inch hole in the wall. People do not buy the input, they buy the outcome. And this is a good example of that here. Again, over to you. Would anyone like to kind of test out how they might describe their idea and answer this question? You can unmute or write in the chat, up to you.
Could I give mine a go? I don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Homesteady is a bit, so Homesteady is the name of the platform. Homesteady is a bit like a helpful neighbor who's always there for you. They're great at DIY, and they have a list of builders they can personally recommend. Better still, they're really connected with what's going on in the local community, and sometimes it just feels like they know everything.
Love it. Love it. It's really personal. It's really simple. I think my feedback kind of goes back to the last conversation we had earlier, which is like the outcomes. So it's a friendly neighbor, but like, what are the tangible outcomes for me? So, I mean, I made some up for you, but it's like peace of mind, cutting my household bills, reducing risk of like a pipe leak, which costs thousands of pounds to fix, creating stronger bonds between neighbors, you know, making me sleep well at night, whatever it is. So that's like the next to add on. In the same, in this example on screen here, there are just keywords here, right? Navigate their commute safely. Safety is a benefit. Quickly, saving time, reduce pollution, improved health, more pleasurable journeys. 5 outcomes, right? Always think about impact, outcomes, benefits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Irene, your hand is up.
Yeah, you know how you've got their mobile app? I'm just thinking, like, can you still use that, or is that considered jargon? And how much can you actually actually use?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
you said before platform, we couldn't, like, platform's too generic, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people know what a mobile app is, right? And of course, the people actually reading your applications will know what a mobile app is. The point of the phrasing of this question is not like call up a grandparent and talk about it. It's like, just make it easy to understand. So in your case, you know, are you working on complex or novel technologies or science or something?
I'm working on a progressive web app, so I don't know how to rephrase that into something that's a little bit that's specific, but without the jargon.
What does it do? What benefits does it give me?
It optimizes people's health through social connection, medical connection, and mental health well-being connection with specialists, but it's centered around the user.
Yep. So the progressive web app is the input again. The outcome is about improved health outcomes by the sounds of things. I would also avoid saying optimized health because, again, like, it doesn't actually mean anything to me. It's not specific. So you might say increasing health outcomes by reducing time to finding the right clinician from 3 weeks to 3 hours, you know, speeding up time to receive the right medication prescription, increasing social cohesion. These kind of more measurable outcomes are stronger than health optimization, which is just, it's too easy to say and it's too generic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was my problem, is trying to be reducing the jargon, but being specific enough without jargon. Okay, fab. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, we're going to move on. This next section is a little bit more, maybe needs a bit of thought, which is the question, my idea will make money by, and there's loads of different ways to make money. The first thing I would say is some people say, I make money by raising investment. Do not say that. Raising investment is not generating revenue for your business. It is not a sustainable revenue model. It is a means of selling part of your company to invest into your company, but it's not revenue that will help it grow. The key questions to ask yourself are, who uses your solution? Who pays for your solution? Often they're the same person. If I buy this jumper, I use it and I pay for it. But often they're also different people. You know, if I benefit from a mobile app as a patient that is optimizing like triage services at A&E, the NHS might pay, or the Integrated Care Board, or whoever they might be, but the end user doesn't pay anything, but they benefit. And then the last thing is how much. So every time you sell a unit, a product, a service, a subscription, an experience, a membership, how much do people pay? So that's the first thing. And then the second is your revenue model. So to bring this to life a little bit, there's a few different types of revenue model. The first is selling to an individual consumer. So I own a fashion brand and I have a shop on Stoke Newington High Street outside my flat here, and I sell jumpers to people on the street. That is B2C, or what is sometimes called direct to consumer. However, if I was a wholesaler and I made clothes, but sold them to, other shops, who would then sell it on to the person on the street, that is B2B, so selling to a business. And B2B is when a company pays, an organization pays. It might also be a government, a charity. Charity might give you some like grant funding to run what you're doing. It might be a local council. So B2B is also like B2G, like business to government. The next one is B, a bit of a mouthful, B2B2C, business to consumer. So for example, if I built a mental health app for students at City University or any London university, the university might pay me for access, annual access to the app for 10,000 students. And they pay me £100 per year per license. So they'll pay me quite a lot of money for that. They'll pay me £1 million per year. Not sure if that's realistic or not, but anyway. But the people who use it would be the students, but the students don't pay. So B2B2C is you sell to the business, who then distribute to the individuals. Please, if you've got any questions on this, please jump in or write in the chat. Some of this stuff might be new. The next revenue model is marketplace. This is something that's kind of really exploded over the last 15 years. This is where you connect supply and demand and charge a fee for that. So supply of taxis in London, demand for taxi trips, that's Uber. Supply of spare rooms or letting properties is Airbnb. And then the demand is like tourists and travelers who need somewhere to stay. And when you pay £100 for a night in an Airbnb would charge, let's say, £12 for that service of connecting supply and demand. So that is a marketplace. And then the last model is a little bit more nuanced, and it's called a platform model, where you connect supply and demand, but there's no transaction. No one pays at that point, but a third party, a third group would pay. So on Google, we search a million times a day for different pieces of information, but you never pay for most of Google services. But Google run ads. So brands and companies will advertise through Google search engine, and they're essentially paying Google to give us free access to the world's information that they store on their platform. So I'm going to pause there. I'd love to hear from you what revenue models that you're exploring, and if you would like any feedback on those.
Sorry, go ahead, Beard. It's you first.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question on the platform model. Based on how it's described, I guess a prerequisite would be having a lot of users already on your platform. Is that correct? Right.
It's different kind of preconditions for these different models, but give me an example of what you're exploring and I can tell you more.
Yeah, so we're considering building an app that lets people share food items, right, that they would otherwise throw away. And one of the avenues we're thinking of is having like sustainability brands or brands that care about, reducing their carbon emissions to be parts of the platform, in the sense that we can be like affiliate marketing for them by showing their ads and their products on the platform. But in order for that to be of any tangible revenue for them, we would need to have a large number of users, because I know, for example, Google Ads, they pay you cents per click, and it's even less if they don't click on the ad, right?
Yeah, let me address that. So your model is quite similar to Tree app, which you may have come across. It's a really cool company. Basically, you go onto the app every morning and you watch an ad for about 15 seconds. And once you've watched the ad, they plant a tree for you. And brands pay for the right to advertise to their users on the app. Okay, so that's basically like, in-app ads or like affiliate marketing schemes.
Yeah,
That's a little bit about like how your model might work. And the preconditions for that is that as an advertiser, as a brand, I probably wouldn't go to you to advertise if you told me, Ed, I have 30 users on my app, because it's not going to be worth my while. But as you suggest, if you had 1,000, 10,000, whatever users on your app, then I'd be more likely to say, yes, cool, they're my target audience. I would pay to advertise to your users. So there's different ways of doing that, but often people release an app like yours for free and then drive users onto the platform for the first 3, 6, 12 months, however long they need. And then at that point, they're ready to sell to advertisers.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Another question. I know for B2B models that those contracts tend to be quite back-end heavy, in the sense that you get paid in the long run and not upfront. Is that something that can be potentially a problem if you're looking, say, for investors to join in on the idea?
So I, first of all, would be, I wouldn't make generalizations. There's lots of different ways of making money B2B. Like, for example, I use a piece of software called Airtable the whole time. It is B2B because it sells to businesses. And they charge me £18 a month, every month. And it took me about 3 minutes to sign up and start paying. So they generated money from me, like from day one. Some big contracts, you might you have your first sales meeting with a client, like on the 1st of February, and then they end up paying you an invoice 12 months later. It can take time, but it all depends on what you're selling, who you're selling to. But for investors, really, it's about making sure you can build like a financial plan that shows a pathway towards sustainability. And it doesn't matter if you're selling, like in any of these revenue models, you just need to be able to evidence that you can make money through it.
Okay. All right, I think those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So anyone else would like sort of feedback on their revenue model? This is the first time that you've developed something like this.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I don't know how to put the little yellow hand up. Sorry. Apologies, I can't find it. So this is something that we've discussed enormously. And I suppose it's always kind of rife with conscience and all those kind of things. Because at first we believed that it was the platform model, as you have suggested on your slide, for childhood. which was, you know, that we get to a point where we're able to have advertising on our app, but it kind of feels wrong. It doesn't feel as though it'd be part of the brand. So we then thought that it could be something a bit more within the realms of B2B, which would be possibly, and this is still very much kind of like, you know, blue sky thinking, what a terrible term, but anyway, of kind of like, could we be approaching developers, city planners, etc., giving them the intelligence that we have. So basically these gorgeous childhood memories of how these urban spaces have been used in order to actually deliver much better cities. So I think I'm in a bit of a, I think I'm in a proper flux about it, because I can't, my brain can't be black and white about it. And I think that's where I'm struggling a bit on it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the first thing I would say is that this stuff is not easy. I think the part of building a business that most of us are most scared of is turning it into revenue, because it's money. You know, it can be uncomfortable. It takes time to test out. There's loads of stuff. It's the thing we have the least control over. You know, we can design the thing and build the thing and brand it and all of that, but we can't control whether people pay for it, really. We can do our best, but we can't have full control. So the main thing I'd say is, I mean, I can't tell you what's the right way to go or not, but you can find that out through testing. So, for example, if you were to build an app like this, you know, actually the first test is, do people use it?
Absolutely.
Go on there, do they spend, you might say, we want people to spend an hour a week on this app, and that's success. Okay, let's test that out. And then of those people who spend an hour a week, you might say, you might send them a survey or do a little like test button to say, you know, would you spend £5 a month on this? So you're testing, do the users pay? And then you can at the same time, you know, find people, I don't know, in housing associations, local authorities, whoever your like business customers might be, call them up and say, you know, what technology do you spend money on? How are you thinking about, you know, community activity, or what's called social prescribing, which is a big buzzword now in healthcare provision that you might have come across, and think like, what are their budgets? What is their willingness to pay? So you do a bit of, you know, research there as well. And you could also, you know, once you've got users to speak to, you could say, you know, how would you feel about ads? Like rate 1 to 10, 10 being, I would never use the app in my life if I was showing ads every day, and 1 being like, well, if it keeps it free, I don't really care. Test this stuff out. You know, one of the, I think, most really amazing apps in the world is Duolingo.
Yeah.
They've been able to provide, I don't really like the way they teach language, but their model is amazing, which is, you know, they, I think they have more people learning English on their app globally than the entire population of under 18s in North America or something. Anyway, crazy. But they don't have to pay for it because they've got ads. And often there's a trade-off of like, oh yeah, okay, I have to watch an ad for 10 seconds. But like, I get all of this stuff for free. I wouldn't be so resistant to that idea. I wouldn't exclude it, basically.
Okay. No, that's really that's good to hear.
Have to feel like you're doing something cynical or whatever, you know. it can enable impact, right?
Yeah.
And Duolingo, you know, businesses pay for Duolingo and they do corporate subscriptions and stuff. So they have this whole like blended model. But yeah.
Thank you.
Lots of approaches. Okay, any other thoughts or questions on this? Just,
Hi.
you know, on time.
Just, yeah. If there is a chance to make it like business to business or business to government, in your experience, which one would you recommend to go for?
Sorry, Oscar, could you repeat the question?
If the revenue model can suit into business to business or directly business to government? Yeah.
I'm struggling to hear the full question.
Like in the case of Duolingo is now paid by businesses, adverts and all that. But what about if it was first introduced to the government, the chance to the government to help population to learn their language? Is it better to offer it to the government or just to the business?
So it sounds, you're a little bit muffled, but it sounds like the question, is it better to offer it to business or government? There are some questions I kind of refuse to answer, and that's an example of one, because I can't tell you. This is like going out and being scientific and learning, speaking to people in government and business and asking them, speaking to your target users. That's where you'll learn this stuff. I think a broad generalization is that right now in 2024, governments do not have much money. That is not to say don't sell to government, but I would almost certainly say don't expect it to be easy. Local councils are going bust and being like dug out of administration. And so make it easier for yourselves by finding the people most likely to pay. That would be my advice. Okay, we're going to move on. So the next question is, how does your idea meet the aims of the award? So this goes back to the categories, the award categories that I mentioned at the start. And this is all about contextualizing your work within, the context of London. So any questions on this one? Is anyone unclear, like how you might fit in with the award, what category you might be suitable for? No? Okay. I'm going to assume that you're all happy and comfortable replying to that question. And then the last question is about positive environmental and or societal impact. And here, this is all about, the results of your intervention, the benefits of your solution. And these are often best broken up into outputs and outcomes. So outputs are something that might happen immediately after someone used your solution. So for a youth education scheme, the young people learned skills, they practiced behaviors, they covered specific topics. So those are tangible, immediate outputs. But outcomes are kind of like the broader vision and the broader impact over the long term. So for this youth education scheme, the outcome, the social impact, might be reduced unemployment, crime rates, school dropout rates, increased lifetime earnings. So these are like much bigger picture kind of impact statistics. Any questions on this side? Just checking the chat. Irani?
I know you've got the reduced unemployment. What about reducing things like health inequalities? Could that be an outcome?
Yes. Again, with something like health inequalities, My preference would be to be more specific. Health inequalities means lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Can you describe
Sorry, say that again.
you describe what you mean specifically about reducing health inequality?
I guess in certain urban areas, there are people who have increased morbidity and mortality, those who are more vulnerable. So those with learning disabilities, those with mental health conditions, and quite often because of the disparities in the way we fund health and social services, that leads to increasing health inequalities. So by joining them up through a platform that connects them, we can then reduce the amount of time being wasted connecting with the services that need to be connected with to then reduce health inequalities.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, so I think framing it like that really works. And, you know, when I think about health inequalities, to choose a component of it, it's like the output is increasing, for example, increasing access or speed of being seen by a GP, or localizing clinical screening opportunities to local areas for those people who otherwise might be overlooked or marginalized by those services. So that's like an output, easier access. And then an outcome is like increased health outcomes, lower mortality rates, etc. Right? Does that make sense? So one is like the output, making this easier, including people more, and then outcomes is like improved health, which also might have economic impact, so they're more active in the labor force, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we've just been joined by the amazing Cassie. Hello, Cassie.
Hi, hi everyone.
Hey, I'm trying to find your. I'm going to spotlight you. There we go. And Cassie has been a facilitator in some of the workshops you guys might have been to, but is also has a whole success story from the Mayor's Entrepreneur Program. So Cassie has joined us today to share a little bit about her story. Cassie, yeah, how did you go about applying for the competition, and what helped you to be successful?
So I applied 3 times actually. So I started off by joining these workshops and trying to get a feel for what was needed for the application. The first year I applied, I didn't get that far, but made use of the mentoring that was available, and I think that really helped to. The idea was there, but really how I talked about and described my idea and what the business and how it was going to function was the bit that I wasn't so good at. So yeah, then I applied another time, got through to the semi-finals, and that was as far as I made it. And then the third and final time in 2021, when I applied was when I was successful and won. Very, yes, grateful. And yeah, there's a lot of learning each time that I've done the application. Really about, I think the most important thing was learning to say my idea quite succinctly. So trying to cut back with using too much jargon, because a lot of the people reading your application may not be an expert in the area that you're focused in. But also making sure not to repeat myself in some of the applications. And when I look back on some of the questions that I've written previously in that first time, I kind of repeated a lot of the same things over and over again, and it really wastes word count and wastes time when you can really be saying more impactful things. So I think that's probably the biggest learning. And also, I mean, I'm sure everyone's already started their applications and probably nearly finished, but if there's anyone who's struggling to get started, one thing that I'd done the first time I ever done it was a voice to text on Microsoft Docs, or Word Docs, just so that when you speak out, sometimes it's easier for the flow of how you write. So yeah, you can just speak out some ideas and start answering the questions as you say them, which I think helps a little bit just to get started if anyone isn't quite there yet.
I love that. I've never thought of doing that, but I think I'll find that.
Especially when you're trying to think of ideas, I think it's quite good to start connecting things. And I think as well, if you do prefer to write it down, just to read it out loud to yourself, because sometimes you don't realize how things maybe don't sound quite right until you actually say them out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And how did you go about drafting your questions while you were applying?
So I think this is probably advice for everyone if you don't already do it. I continuously keep, I store everything on Google Drive. So I keep everything on Docs. So I'll copy and paste all the questions into a Google Doc, and then start writing down certain sort of key points if there's figures and facts that I need per question. But I keep that there so that I can look back on it if there's another award, or there's, maybe the pitch, if you get through to the next stage, it means you've got that reference point. But really where I started from was looking at what I knew best, which was obviously the business idea. And also another really important part is obviously your customers. So really making sure that if I didn't already at that point, which I didn't, starting to speak and just sending emails to people who were potential customers and starting to get some of that information to understand, is my idea viable? Do I have sort of a market for this? And that was just by sending emails and, speaking directly to people. Making sure I also had some really strong figures, with the business that I'm in. It's sustainable materials for fashion. So really starting to understand what the impacts were. 80% of a fashion designer's impact is in raw materials. So those kind of figures that really strengthen why there's a need for the idea that I had. And also really making sure that I tied it to London specific. So the designers I spoke to were based in London. And even some of the sources of the materials, I looked at what existed in London, because that is obviously crucial to this competition.
Mm-hmm. Cassie, there's an irony here. You've actually not been in this session, but you are endorsing all of the points I've been trying to put across.
Great.
Any questions from the group for Cassie while she's here?
Yeah, I've done this 3 times as well, so I feel like I've got really good practice at it. So if there's anything at all anyone has any questions about.
Irene?
Hi, Cassie. Thanks for your time, for coming and talking with us. Just from, one application to the other, did your idea iterate, and how did that change your application process at each point?
Yeah, definitely. Only slightly, of course, but I think you're always going to cater the questions to the specifics of the competition. So, for example, with the Mayor's Award, it is about London. So really looking at your customers here. You can talk about, how you expand after, but really focusing on how the idea is applicable to London. But also, I think every time, your business is always growing. So it's always slightly adapted and growing. And really that comes from not just me deciding to change it, but from when I speak to customers, when I'm doing the research on, where the market is, that's why it will change and that's why it will adapt. But that's always going to be, each time I've done those applications, it's slightly changed. Actually, the material sort of idea that I first applied with completely changed from the next year, because through the research that I've been doing, realized that wasn't really where the market was. So I slightly pivoted. So yeah, I think as long as it's, grounded in sort of facts and truth, and then that's absolutely fine. And then someone else, Emma, do you have a question?
Hi, Cassie. Thank you so much for sharing. I think my question is similar to Irene's, because I just wanted to know if every year you changed your idea, or you just stuck with the same overall arching idea, but just tweaked as you were going.
Yeah, so when I say I changed it, it's still the business idea was the same, but the sort of some of those details within it slightly adapted, and that was really just down to my decision on what the business I wanted it to be, and the strength of through talking to customers. So it really grew because I was growing the business idea itself. But yeah, it didn't just completely change from like a whole different business idea. So the idea, the premise was the same. Some of those details then started to adapt, and the types of customers. Initially, I was more B2C. Then I actually decided that the strength was in the B2B side of things. So that's how those kinds of things adapted. So if you applied last year, think that, it's not necessarily that your idea wasn't good. It might just be that there's some things that need to be tweaked, and making sure that every sentence and every word that you say has impact, because it's really not that much of a word count. It may seem like it's a lot to write, but when you're trying to tell how amazing your business idea is, it's really actually not a lot of space. So make sure that every sentence, every figure has a lot of strength to it. I just saw a question in the chat. Cassie, your
Thank you
background.
so much, Cassie. Thank you.
No problem, Emma. Yes, my background was in fashion textiles, and then I done my master's in biodesign. So I've a bit of background in materials and fashion.
And now doing a PhD, right?
Yes, and now I'm doing a PhD. Can't stop with the, education. We want to leave uni, be a student forever.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Cassie. Any last questions for?
Oh yes, how developed. So the first time I applied, so the question in the chat for anyone who can't see was how developed was your business when I applied. The first time I applied, it was just an idea. I had done some experiments with materials and, then started to form this idea, and it really wasn't anywhere yet. Hadn't had any customers, hadn't made any sales. The following year, I had started to speak with more customers or potential customers, and the materials were a lot further along. By the time then that I had applied, that I'd won, the business was a little bit further. I had a little bit of, customer interactions, not necessarily sales, because we are still in that R&D phase of the materials. But I'd say, I still got to the semi-finals without, when it was still sort of that idea phase, but there was a really strong business case. So I think that's the important part, is making sure that, yes, it may be an idea, but you've thought things through, you still spoke to customers, because just because you don't have the product there doesn't mean you can't speak to those people who would buy your product, in order to get that information as to whether it's viable.
Thank you.
That is such valuable advice. Thank you. I think a lot of people think, oh, everyone applying has already got running or whatever. That is not the case. Honestly, the majority of people are still at idea stage. But as Cassie says, that does not stop you going out and testing how people respond, even to an idea. It's just something fugazi that doesn't yet exist. So yeah, 100% agree with that. Cassie, thanks so much for giving up your time, for being here. You're welcome to drop off or stick around for. I mean, we're wrapping up now, but yeah, thanks so much. And
I'll just turn my camera off, but stay. If anyone has any questions, I'll just respond to them in the chat.
Amazing. Cheers, Cassie. And for everyone else, today's not the only way that we want to support you guys. So in the chat, you will see that we've created basically like a toolkit for nailing your applications. The link to the Google Doc is there in the chat right now. And so it's actually a whole guide to building a startup. So if you scroll to the bottom, there's stuff on your applications, and then above there is a link to my Calendly, which is where you can book time to get feedback on your idea or on your application. And as someone asked, those will be like in very small groups, so you'll get a chance to meet other people and learn what other people are doing. And it also means that we can deliver this stuff at scale. So there's lots of you to get through. So we're trying to meet with as many of you as possible. So we're going to wrap up there. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. I will share the slides one more time in the chat in case you missed them last time. And just to kind of echo some of the things Cassie said, number one, like, take all of the questions and draft them, and work on them along the side, pick up, stats and things as you go along, back things up with evidence. Think also about going for clarity over complexity. I've shared hopefully some examples of some pretty complex and disorientating answers where simplicity and cut through is much more important. And then most of all, this idea of like starting with why, start with the vision, the impact, the outcomes of what you're setting out to build, rather than the inputs. And that is how you bring people on a journey with you. Emma, time for one last question.
Yes, please. I wanted to confirm, so in my application, can I apply as an individual or I can apply as a team if I wanted to?
Yeah, either is fine.
Okay, thank you.
That was a quick one. Okay, thank you so much. Great to see you all here. And as Cassie said, good luck. You guys are going to be brilliant. Can't wait to see how you get on through this process. And as a final teaser, as a kind of reward for those of you who apply, you actually get access to probably my favorite workshop of this whole process, which is about MVPs and how to build and prototype your idea. So you'll learn about building landing pages, how to build an app without writing any code, kind of cool, and all sorts of other approaches to building out your products. So good luck, have a nice evening, and hopefully catch you next time. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.